Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. In case you're new here, my name is Jennifer, and it's a beautiful day outside today. It's in the 50s, and in Connecticut, when you get a day in the 50s in March, you definitely have to take advantage of it. So as you can see behind me, we have a tangled mess in our raspberry patch. That's what we're going to be dealing with today. We are basically going to be pruning these raspberries and just getting them ready for new growth and getting them ready to hopefully give us a really beautiful, delicious, and abundant raspberry crop this season. Now, when I'm pruning raspberries, I like to do that in basically really late winter or really early spring before these raspberries are actually showing any signs of growth. Now, the end of winter has been on the cold side. Normally, I try to get to this job a little bit earlier in the year, but this year, because the winter has been on the cold side, my raspberries aren't showing any signs of growth yet, so I think we're in time. But you basically want to prune them while the raspberries are still dormant. Now, the type of raspberries that I have here are Everbearing Raspberries. Basically what that means is that depending on how I prune them, I have the potential to get 2 raspberry crops from the same bushes each year. So I can get a summer crop, which I usually get sometime in July, and then I can also get what's called the fall crop, which I usually actually get in late summer. So basically how an Everbearing raspberry bush works is when it sends up a cane, the cane that it sends up that year will bear the first year, and that is the second crop, that's the fall crop. And then that same cane will bear again one more time the following year, and that's the summer crop. So the summer crop that we got last year was on canes that it was their second year, and the fall crop that we got last year was on canes that were bearing for the very first time. It was their first year. Now, once the canes bear for the second time, so basically the canes that gave us fruit last summer, that specific cane dies, and we want to just prune it completely out. The canes that gave me fruit last fall will give me another crop this summer, depending on how I prune them. And I prefer to prune my Everbearing raspberries so that I do get 2 crops. There's an alternative method to prune them where you only get 1 crop. You basically only get the fall crop. But people say that when you do it that way, the fall crop is earlier and it is larger. And because it's easier to maintain, a lot of people choose to prune that way. I like to get the 2 crops. And honestly, there was one year I tried to prune the method to get only 1 crop, to only get the fall crop. And I guess I didn't prune them low enough because I still got a summer crop anyway. So since then, I've decided we're just going to go with it. These raspberries really want to bear twice, so we're going to let them do that. So basically what we're going to do is we're first going to find all the canes that bore last summer for me. Those canes will be completely dead. We're just going to prune those completely out and just throw them in the woods or compost them. Then we're going to go through the second set of canes. Those would be the ones that bore fruit last fall for me. And we are going to trim those back pretty substantially. If we don't trim them back, they're going to end up getting really tall. They'll be a lot more manageable if we prune them back. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I did mention that I like to do this job in either really late winter or really early spring. And I like to pick a day that's fairly nice outside like today, but still on the cool side, because I find it pretty important to wear long sleeves to do this job. I've done it on some beautiful days before. I'll be out here working in a t-shirt or a tank top and get all scratched up. So because of that, I like to wear long sleeves. So I like to choose a day that's comfortable but not too warm, and that's what we have today. So perfect day to get this done. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and find these dead canes like this one here. You can see it really looks dead. It feels kind of brittle. You can see that the bark is peeling off of it. We're just going to go ahead and clip this down as low as we can and get this out of here. So once I get that clipped out, I can verify that this is in fact a completely dead cane by looking at the interior part of it. See how it basically just looks brown. There isn't any green. If you see any green, that's a sign of life. Once in a while I do end up mistaking a living cane for a dead one and prune out one that I don't mean to. But honestly, raspberry plants are really tough, and even if you do that, it'll still be completely fine. But as I said, you can just see that this one is in fact dead. So the reason we want to prune the dead canes out is because if we leave them here, this raspberry patch is going to get really overgrown, really crowded, and basically really hard to work with. So we've got a handful of dead ones right here. I'm just going to go ahead and prune these all out. One thing I will say is that if you are going for maximum efficiency and the easiest maintenance, you do not want to set up your raspberry patch the way I did. When I first set this up, I set this up years ago, and I didn't really understand exactly how raspberries grew, exactly how fast they spread, and how much space they ultimately take up. And so I didn't really design this raspberry patch in the ideal way. Actually, originally, this whole bed where the raspberries are was a strawberry bed. They didn't do very well here, so I ended up planting raspberries instead, which have definitely thrived. But ideally, you would want the bed to be a little bit narrower than what I have here. And you can see in the back there, I have that stone wall behind it. So I don't really have a good walking path to access the back of the raspberry patch, which makes harvesting raspberries from the back a little bit difficult. So ideally, what you would want to do when you're first setting up a raspberry patch is to make the actual bed where the raspberries grow much narrower and make sure that you have paths on each side that are easy to maintain. So for example, if you put it in a field and you're able to mow on both sides of the raspberries and access them from both sides, so that would be a much more ideal way to set things up. But then again, if you've been following along with me for any real length of time, you know that I don't always do things in the most ideal way. So that will come as no surprise to you. So I'm just going to go through this raspberry patch. I'm going to find the rest of all those dead canes. I'm going to prune them all out. And even just having that part done is going to make a huge difference in how this raspberry bed looks. All right, I just want to show you guys here. I did prune this on purpose because it was really in the way, but this is a living cane that I pruned. So I don't know how well you can see on the camera, but you see how it's surrounded by a ring of green along the outside there? That's a sign that this cane is in fact alive, and the living canes do have to be cut back too, but I just wanted to show you how to recognize if you've cut a living cane or a dead cane. All right, so I went through the raspberry patch and I cut or pulled out all of the dead canes, at least all the ones that I could find. There's probably a few that I missed that I'll find when we start cutting back the live canes. I did also cut back a few of the live canes already too, because they were kind of in my way when I was getting to the dead ones. But as you can see behind me, it already looks a lot better. We still have quite a bit of work to do, but even just pulling out the dead canes made a huge difference. All right, so as you can see here, even with the dead raspberry canes pruned out of this wild raspberry patch, it's still a little bit crazy. I mean, we've still got raspberry canes that are taller than me by several feet. That's going to be unmanageable, so I'm going to cut those down to a manageable level, and these living canes will give us basically our first crop this year. So sometime around July, all these living canes will give us a crop of raspberries, but I do not want them to be taller than me. I don't want them to be that unruly, and this raspberry patch is right next to my driveway. I don't want them leaning across the driveway and scratching my car when I try to go into the garage. So we're going to cut these down to a manageable level. So I am not an expert raspberry pruner. I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to prune these in the ultimate way for maximum yield, but what I'm going to do is prune them in a way that works for me, that I can manage. So I'm going to take, say this cane here, that even when I'm standing up, I know you can't even see the top of it on the camera, is several feet taller than me, and I'm going to cut it down so it's maybe about a foot tall or so. So I'm just going to cut it right around here. As you can see, show you again that this is in fact a living cane. You can see the green around the edge of the stem. That shows that that cane is alive, and now it's much more manageable. So it will gain a little bit of height as the season goes on and it starts getting its leaves, but it's going to stay pretty short and manageable. So as you can see, we use this basic wire system to trellis our raspberries and just kind of keep them from getting completely out of control. So I just cut this one so that it is tall enough to still be held in place by this bottom wire. And if it gets tall enough to reach the second wire here, I'm just going to make sure it grows behind the wire as it grows. This isn't like a professional raspberry trellising system or anything like that. This is just basically us making do with what we have. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to cut down all the canes so that they're about this tall, and it's going to make a huge difference. So we got our raspberry patch all pruned. It looks so much better and so much neater now. Now, as I said, I'm not being incredibly scientific about it. You can research if you want to get into really in-depth pruning for absolute maximum yield. People will recommend thinning out a certain percentage of the living canes or canes that are maybe under a certain diameter, and you can definitely look into that. I just kind of do this pretty much low maintenance, kind of just by the seat of my pants kind of method for pruning, and it works really well for me. So I am super excited for raspberry season. I know it's a little ways away, but I love raspberries. In my opinion, they are probably the most rewarding fruit that I grow. So I am super excited to have this job taken care of. Now I can just let the raspberry plants leaf out and grow and just be ready for a glorious season of harvest. So I'm just going to show you guys what our raspberry patch looks like. I'm going to show you what my driveway looks like. Right now the raspberry patch looks better than the driveway. So I've got a big mess to clean up in the driveway. So as you can see through here, the raspberry patch is so much more manageable now, and the raspberries aren't going to be towering over us, at least in the beginning. By fall, I'm sure they will be again, but it's looking a lot better. My driveway, on the other hand, I've got a big mess to clean up, so I'm gonna get going and get that all cleaned up. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today while I pruned up these raspberries and got them all ready for spring, got that raspberry bed cleaned up, and now we can just sit back and watch it grow. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you're looking forward to spring as much as I am, and I can't wait to see you guys again soon. Bye guys, I'll see you next time.